Passes unanimously. That brings us to item number 15, which is our review of board policies regarding procurement construction, shown in Exhibit B.
And I hate to do this, board, but we're going to have to bring you back down for the next two presentations as well, so.
I won't. On the hot seat. Well,
While we're waiting on the projector to warm up, I'll introduce Linda Robinson. If you haven't had the opportunity, she's our procurement coordinator for the district. She's been with us for a few months now, and
yes, I'm very happy to be here. Board Chair and members of the board, Dr. Hefner, I appreciate the opportunity to provide for you an overview of the district's procurement code as it pertains. It's on? Maybe I need to move a little bit closer. Okay, I'll begin again. Can you hear me well now? Okay, great. Again, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come before you to provide an overview of the district's procurement code as it pertains to construction. A copy of the code, yeah, it's really on. A copy of the code, that portion that deals with construction, was included in your packet along with a copy of this presentation. The first step in the process after board approval of a project is selecting a construction method. There are several methods, but the most common are design, bid, build, and that's where a contract is negotiated with architects to design the project, and then bids are solicited from construction firms to bid the project. There's design, build, which is where a contract is negotiated with one firm who has the responsibility of bidding, designing the project, and building it. We also have the construction management. The construction manager works with the design team to design the project and acts as the prime contractor doing construction. Yes. Sure.
On the construction, think about, whoa.
Go ahead and say.
Yeah, I know, everybody will run out of here. On the construction management, and I think that maybe needs to be cleared up a little bit, and I think I see Scott Carlin back behind here. Construction management at risk. Should that be where that is? Because as we look at construction management, I think that we think of a construction management as the owner's representative.
That is correct, and actually, according to the South Carolina code, South Carolina only allows the construction at risk.
So should that have been construction management at risk? But to clarify that Because, I mean, I know what you meant,
Okay, but
but
yes.
I don't know if they understood what that meant.
Yes, to clarify, it should be construction management at risk.
Okay.
How do you go about deciding which method, as far as a project comes up, which one of these three you use?
There are several considerations. You want to look at what the particular project is to decide which method would be best for that particular project. You may want to look at finance to determine, because with design, bid, build, it's usually cheaper because the construction part, which has, well, that's where all the costs are. And that's solicited through competitive sealed bidding, so you'll get a better price. You also, under design, bid, build, of course, the design is one part of it, the construction is another. So if there are errors or omissions in the design part, this is one of the cons of it. The owner, which is the district, will bear the cost of errors that are found during the construction process. So those are some of the considerations that you would want to take in before you make that decision, depending on what type project it is.
Follow up to that from what her question was and your answer. Is it someone, and this may be Dr. Hefner's, is there someone that we use that should advise the board as far as the one, like you mentioned, pros and cons, so that we see that before we go into a project? You know, in other words, who would be the best person to advise us as a board, the whys of which one to choose?
Actually, the determination would rest with our CFO in consultation with our facilities manager.
Oh, I think we cut me. Am I on? Have we any history in the sense of, you know, over, say, our 10 years of, and I know we've been building a long time, but I was going to say, do we usually use that first one? You know, you were saying it had some cons to it that, I'd like to know just the history of what, is that the one we've used the most as District 5 whenever we were?
Well, in my nine-month
Yeah, that'd be good, 9 years. That'll be my answer.
My 9-month experience,
Oh,
but
wow.
going No, but just looking back over history, doing the bond referendum, we used the construction management approach. Recently, most of the projects that I've seen is the design, bid, build. We use construction managers doing the bond referendum.
We use construction managers to manage it as an owner's representative. But we didn't use construction management to build the project as it would be at risk. You would have to put construction management at risk to make that to where the construction. Actually, construction management at risk is a fairly new way of doing things. Am I correct? So, construction, because that construction management at risk puts the construction manager responsible for the construction. But construction management alone is only representing the owner's representative. So actually, wouldn't it be the first one?
I think we did do the design, bid, build for most of the bond.
It would be the first one.
Because we had architects come in and design it, and then we bid it all
Okay,
out.
I stand corrected.
But you
And
weren't
Lynn
here.
is-
You've only been here 2 months, so.
Well, actually, and I looked forward, I just actually made a mistake, and Lynn is over there telling me we use design, bid, build, so
That's what
that
I thought.
is.
And then they just managed.
Yeah, but that's a good, construction management at risk is not a bad thing to think about in the future.
Okay?
And I appreciate you showing us the three kinds,
Oh,
so yes.
I thank you for correcting me. I would have been giving out wrong information to other people as well, so thank you. Whichever method is selected, the procurement of professional services is going to be necessary. Professional services include architect and engineering services, construction management service, rather as an advisor or at risk, and land surveying services. For services estimated not to exceed $25,000, the district may award a contract by direct selection and negotiation. These type contracts are limited to $75,000 during a 2-year period, and that limit is to promote competition. For services expected to exceed $25,000, the code actually dictates that a district selection committee whose members are selected by the board be established. The superintendent or his designee must sit as a permanent member of the committee. This committee is responsible for developing the description of the project, preparing the formal invitation for advertisement, interviewing, evaluating, and ranking the most qualified firms.
You need a question? You got a question? Here, you have some.
So who, you listed who is on the, or what it's supposed to be, but I know one time I did an appeals. That's a completely separate issue, if you have an appeals on a procurement project. But I'm kind of unaware of who's on this committee, as far as,
Well, the board will actually, or whoever they designate, if they so desire, will select the members based on whomever they think is most qualified.
When have we had this to where we have a district selection committee in place? Because do we have one? And that's exactly what Ms. Bumgardner, I mean, so have we, in my 4 years on this board, I don't recall a district selection committee. So can you help me there? Because I mean, is this something that we have not done? Or is this not or is this,
Are we breaking the law?
yeah, something we haven't seen? So can you help me there to understand this?
Well, actually, we have been working off of expired contracts. I am not sure about the selection committee. I would have to check with you. I don't know of one in existence at this time.
Should this be, the district selection committee be kind of what Ms. Bumgarner's talking about? Is this a committee that should be selected once a year, a new committee every year? Or is this just an ongoing committee forever? Or is this somebody, because I know on this committee, and I've read on this different parts about it, is you're right, it says that the committee, that the person that serves on this committee needs to have some idea of what they're doing when they get on this committee. Instead of being just put on there because of a person just sitting there taking care of the seat, understanding what is going on. So, I mean, is this, so there should maybe be different committees, from one selection committee? Do you get what I'm saying a little bit?
Perhaps I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, we had committees through all the beginning stages of the referendum. I mean, there were committees that selected architects. I sat on a committee with Ms. Bumgarner that selected projects. But my reading of what she just said is whenever you've got a construction project, you need to see the committee. You just don't have a committee sitting out there, but you would implement this as you need it. I mean, we're in the final stages of winding down construction projects, But I can remember numerous committees in the days, and most of these people weren't here when we started the construction
This
project.
committee is supposed to be more like for professionals, like for the architects, the engineers and all, or is this for,
Well, she
that,
can
that,
answer.
that's for the that's for professionals.
This is
$25,000.
Professionals.
services.
There is a big difference in professionals, and so you have to think about the word professional, because not everybody's a professional in construction, correct?
Correct.
So, okay, so at one time, when y'all did this, you did have the committees, when y'all selected for the people. Okay, just clearing this up.
Okay, I got one on that. And I know what Ed's talking about, and I remember that about the bond, but I have a question. And I want to be sure that if this is the same thing, or I realize it's got to be over 25,000, so I don't know what the fee was, but I've sat on a committee before, like with three of us, that we were listening to the presentation by CPAs, let's say. This was just a few years back. And then we did this rating. It wasn't a bid thing. It was more like a hiring. But is that part of procurement too, guys? I mean, I tell you what, I'm really glad that we're getting this crash course, because I think I know I need it. I think we all do. We know that there's a procurement by the state. There's certain standards, and then we have our own procurement policy. But I think it's really good we're learning that. So that may be different than what you're talking about here. I just am trying to learn that too. That would still come under procurement if it's a committee that's listening and rating some group. I don't know if we do that anymore. That was back. I wish I remember who was with me on that one, Ms. Bumgarner. It was several years ago. It was like probably from 2008 to 2012. But I have been on a committee. I just wanted to say, I know we've had some committees, but I don't know if it's different from what we're talking about now, and I want clarification. Can you answer that? Robert, you the chair, you all know that.
I can't answer, but I bet Mr. Richardson can shed some light on it.
How about that, Mr. Richardson?
Excuse me. Whoa, I'll try. Well, we chose a CPA firm, sorry, didn't realize the microphone was working so well. We chose a CPA firm to do our annual audit this past year, but that was a decision, the committee was the board in that particular case, right.
A few years back, it was like three of us, right? And I just don't know if that's the same thing, like this kind of committee.
I think that was just probably how you chose to do it. I don't know there was a requirement for.
I got you.
That this is a requirement for those professional services dealing with architects, engineers.
It's more something you're building.
Correct,
I got you. Okay.
correct.
That's all. I just wanted clarification.
And on the back of what Mr. Richardson said, I think if you think back to the early bond referendum days, we were, as a board, selecting architects. We were, as a board, selecting, based on bids, construction companies, that type of thing. And same thing with the construction manager. We rated those people and
So
selected.
it's different than the one I'm remembering.
We're going to let you.
Would this also apply to RFPs, and exactly explain what RFPs are? I mean, I know we,
Okay. Actually, that would be a type of RFP, a request for proposal. And during a request for proposal, you send out a solicitation, you advertise it, and you are asking for specific criteria to be met. And the proposals are evaluated based on the stated criteria in the proposal.
thank you.
You're welcome. Contracts awarded from the district selection committee. The superintendent or his designee will negotiate a contract with the most qualified firm. Final selection of the firm and the contract rests with the board.
If we're going with a bid, and again, I realize I'm learning, if it's a bid process on some big job that exceeds that, do we take, by law, do you have to take the lowest bid? Is that not right?
This is professional services.
Oh, that's different, okay, I'm into the building thing. Okay, this is like, all right, well, say it, where it says most qualified firm, the superintendent or the designate, they just have to go by, I guess, what they know about the company, or, do they get some advice from people that have used the company? I'm trying to figure out how we decide the most qualified, because that's kind of wide open. Because you can think they are, and then they maybe weren't.
True. That's a duty of the selection committee.
So it's a committee again.
Yes, they will interview the firms, and they will rank them, and then they will make, yes.
You're actually given a set of criteria that are advertised that you would rate them based upon.
Like we did the CPA.
Exactly, exactly.
I get that, that was good. I'm in school, so you ask questions.
Instead of going through that whole process that we just outlined, each time professional services are needed, the district may opt to enter into contracts with multiple design firms on an as-needed basis. These contracts are called indefinite delivery contracts, and they're awarded using the same criteria that we just outlined. They're limited to a 2-year period, limited to individuals' service expenditures not to exceed $100,000, and the total expenditures over a 2-year period cannot exceed $300,000.
Am I reading that right? Where it says service exceeding 25,000 but limited to 2-year period, does that still go with that first bullet? And where you can get up to 100,000 or 300,000 in a 2-year period without the board's approval? Is that what that's saying, or I'm misunderstanding it?
No, that's not what it's
Okay,
saying.
good.
These are the same processes that we just outlined.
So I'd go through all those things that were on the other screen. Okay, I got you.
Okay. And our recommendations for projects exceeding 25,000 is to enter into IDCs for projects classified as repair and maintenance, such as roof replacement, heating and air, bathroom renovations, and solicit specific proposals for all other professional services. And now we're at contracts for construction services. All district construction contracts must be awarded by either competitive sealed bids or competitive sealed proposal. And I do want to note that on competitive sealed bids, the district does have the option to pre-qualify the construction firms, and then they only send out the solicitation to the pre-qualified firms.
Well, that's good. So you wouldn't get one in the bid that was the lowest and they weren't very good.
And you haven't looked
Great,
at them
I
yet.
like, okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Can you explain what pre-qualification is?
The process involves another solicitation that has to be advertised, where we send out requests based on certain criteria, and we're asking for qualifications of the firms, such as past experience, reputation, references. And those particular firms would send in their proposals, and then they would be selected based on their qualifications.
So if you don't do pre-qualification, what do they have to do?
If you don't pre-qualify, then you're going to get bids in from any firm, and the code dictates that you have to go with the lowest firm unless there are compelling reasons not to.
And we did not pre-qualify in this last referendum. That's something we ought to consider.
That's what, yeah, I was
going
getting at
forward.
that. Thank you.
When you talk about pre-qualifying, and do you go through another committee? Should you go through another committee or is it the board that is supposed to do the pre-qualifying? Is it the board that picks the contractors, or is it a committee that picks them? Who's going to be the one that's going to make sure that we're using the right contractors?
The code doesn't dictate who should be on the committee, but there is a committee, just like with any other RFP, who would make the selection. The code doesn't dictate it, so it's up to the board.
Up to the board.
The construction firms that bid on the middle school were pre-qualified. I don't recall who was on the committee. That was happening about the time I was
Yes.
getting into work here, but so I don't remember who was on the committee.
And I don't either, and that's what I don't know who actually picked the committee or what, but I think having a committee that, again, has the knowledge of the construction, would be, again, a great thing to do, is make sure that these people that are on this committee that knows what construction is all about when they sit there and have these presentations from these people. All right.
Sort of a follow-up to that, so we can learn from history. We need to know, is it the board, or I want to know, and I hope we all want to know, would it be the board to be sure this committee that should be chosen? Do we as 7 members talk with the superintendent to come up with it, or with Lynn Richardson? I mean, I think I want to know the process that successful construction, within any district, and you've been in another district a long time. I'm trying to learn how we can best find the qualified people, the people to be on the committee. Do each of the board members put in a name and Dr. Hefner vet them and figure out who's good, or Lynn Richardson? I think I want to know the best process and the best way to handle it, instead of just saying, yes, we've got a committee, like Ms. Lovelace is saying, to know that they are people, community members, and I guess it should be a board member too with this. I'd like to see how other districts decide on these committees, or, successful building projects. That's my question.
Okay, well, again, the code does not dictate it, but it would be up to the board to decide. Yes.
Can I say something, Mr. Gann?
Yes, sir.
I would not, we already tried that part about every board member picks a name. But what it would be worth thinking about are best practices, because I would think our staff would probably take the lead in making recommendations, but we probably ought to, if we're going to look at this policy, think about the process of seating that committee, because if the code doesn't dictate it, we have some discretion, but it does not need to be arbitrary like every board member. I mean, because we're not going to get any better representation than the individual board members, but it needs to be probably the superintendent and the staff that make some recommendations, and the board vets it. But I agree, it ought to be people that are knowledgeable, and I think there were suggestions that we pre-qualify everything in the last referendum, and there were reasons why we didn't do that, but I think looking back, it would probably be better to do that. But we can define in a policy how we might vet something, but it needs to be a best practice and not something that politically gets stoked into something that is a disaster, because I've seen that happen.
Mr. Gann, may I ask a question? I just want to clarify what your purpose is. And I think I'm hearing your purpose is to present the codes to us.
Yes,
But you're not here to give us advice, is that right?
that's correct.
Per se. So that part is, you're giving us what the law says, basically, what the code says, and how to work it out best is left up to what we get from the codes. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, from what I'm seeing in your presentation, this is the last part of your
It
presentation.
is.
I want to take it, I'm glad I made some copies of this, because I want to take this a little bit further, because, we're talking about procurement and how things work, and this is what we want to know. Okay, you've got to the bids come in. I'm going to take the barn as an example, because this is something kind of fresh to our minds. And I did make copies of this in case you need one. The barn came in with the bid tab sheet. It came in at $284,955. That was the low bid. But somehow, and I'm going to ask how, y'all need the copies of this? We might have to share. Because we'll have to give her one probably if she. Okay, we see that the construction at the end, $284,995,000. Well, then I see the intent to award, which I see Mr. Richardson ready to go with this, for $271,151. Can't even talk. $271,151,000. Did I say that right? But how, before it was awarded, where was that deduction from the bid tab? Here, I'll give you this one too.
Is it a
It's coming, guys.
$10,000 less?
It's still, nope, it's. Because there were no alternates to where you could take from. So actually, the bid should have been $284,995. That should have been the intent.
There was a few things that were in that bid that were removed or we negotiated. There was a lot of additional fencing. Well, you got to understand, a lot of things happened from the time we presented this to the time this was awarded. The location of the barn was moved out at the Cage Center. The cost for water and sewer went up because of the location change. There was fencing and things that were added during the process, so we had to go back and look at the fencing that was put into that original bid and back off on some of it. Is how we got the price down.
But that would be value engineering. Am I correct on that? Would that be? Because that should have been an addendum to the bid to give everybody the chance to be able to bid it that way. Because I think once you get to that bid sheet of the $284,995, that should be the awarded price. But I still understand that you had to do these. You saying you take these things out of there, but that should have been an addendum to the bid, so that these other two contractors had the opportunity to be able to bid the same thing. I mean, if you had awarded the bid, well, if you awarded the bid at $284,995, would have been over the 10%. So that would mean that you would have to rebid. Am I
Well,
correct?
Now, I was not involved with the negotiations or doing any of that. I don't know exactly what the process was, but let me find that out before I try to answer a question that I don't know the answer to.
Because I can't, and this is something I don't understand, and you might can tell me, because I don't understand it. Because I don't understand how you go from the bid to awarding the bid less, unless it was an addendum to the bid to where somebody else had the opportunity to bid it. Because I don't know if that's right.
We'll
Ms.
get,
Lois, I will check on that for you, and I'll get you an answer.
Okay, because also too, and I'm just using the barn, excuse me, barn, because this is something that I guess kind of new to it. We also ended up having to have architects, of course, and the structural engineer, which also put this at, it was 15,000, I mean, right at 15,000 more dollars. But is this included in the project? Because if it is, I mean, this is jumping it up even higher. Was this $14,500 included in the project? Because I actually told it wasn't, it came out of another pot of money, which to me, it doesn't matter if it comes out of another pot of money, it's still the project of the barn.
Ms. Lovelace, we were here to discuss the procurement policy. We
And this
weren't
is-
here prepared to discuss each individual
Well,
project.
this is the procurement, and this is how it works, and this is the way Ms.,
I understand, but I don't have the information to be able to
but I
answer your
can, but
questions.
if you can just give me the information, because I mean, because I would like to know. And I think that the people, we would like to all know, because I think there's been questions to how this works. And this is why I'm sitting there going, how does this work? Because I don't understand it, and I would like for somebody to sit here and tell me, and maybe tell me in the public how it works.
If I have the information, I'd be glad to give it to
Okay.
you.
Mr. Richardson, what I understand, you're going to get that information to Ms. Lovelace and the rest of the board. You don't have it with you, so that, and I do think we need to stay on track with the procurement policy. We have specific questions, but I think we do need to do that. And that's what, well, it is, but you're taking one project that they didn't come.
I have to take it down in this, because this is a good way to be able to sit.
Well,
and
if
show
you'd,
people
if
how
you had
to do
shared
it.
that with Mr. Richardson prior to tonight, he'd probably come with the answers.
But Mr. Gant, can I make a suggestion? I mean, Ms. Levis, why not just write your questions down?
Oh, I've already experienced writing questions down, get them back from the attorney.
Well, no, I'm saying you can write your questions and send them to whomever from this. I mean, this is about the policy. Just write the
Well, I
questions
mean, he's
down
got it, he can go
and
sit-
ask for,
They've got it down here, they know what my questions are, they know the answers, I don't have to write anything, I already written down.
well, it's hard for me to follow it without being
They know,
previewed.
I mean, I think you know
Then-
what I'm
then-
talking about.
Then there
I think
needs to
Mr.
be,
Richardson knows what
I'm just trying to make a recommendation to the chair is, you know, have a time where the questions are submitted in advance and they're addressed, where people
And
are
that-
prepared, and we're not all here guessing
Right.
what's going on.
That was my suggestion, Ms. Love. Had you presented that prior to, I understand your question. You're saying, here's a bid, here's the people that bid it, but the actual contract was $271. Mr. Richardson is going to give you the answer to that. I don't know any more parts than that. Now, if you want to write it down, that's fine, but I think Mr. Richardson's got it. He knows what you
He's got
want.
it, like I said, because you know what it's like for me to get, when I write a question down, you know where I get my answers from.
Well, you have to ask the question, and
Yeah,
you
when
did.
I ask it, I get it
You've
from an
asked the
attorney.
question, Mr. Richardson's going to give you an answer.
So,
Now, do you have other things in depth like that? You're done? Okay. All right, would you like to continue?
well, actually,
She's finished.
I am done.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Ms. Hutchison, I'm sorry.
This is a procurement question. So now that we have the contracts for the barn, then based on our procurement policy, should the contract come back to us for the board to vote on this contract?
The code does not dictate approval by the board. Again, that would be up to the board to decide if they want to approve it, but the code does not dictate that.
What- That's confusing to me.
I'm not sure I understand the question then.
Well, no, you probably answered it. So I know that the board had approved a general figure for the barn. And so my question is, now that we got the contract back, whether, doesn't matter, you know, it could have been $50,000 less than what the board expected. But, so I would think that the board would have to vote to approve the contract like we do for other building contracts, as we did during the bond referendum.
That is not addressed in the code.
Ms. Hutchinson, I'll try to respond to that.
Okay, thank you.
I think the board has within its rights to do that on any item in our capital budget, especially those ones I think that are probably outside the norm. You know, of course you could with all of them, I guess, but, you know, things like the barn, I guess, would be a prime example that's a little bit out of the norm. So I think the board is within their rights to request that at any time during the capital budget process, to let us know that up front, and we'll make sure that that happens. I don't know that you want to get involved with things like HVAC and roof replacement, those kind of things, but then again, you might, but that would be
No.
your prerogative.
Thank you. I think that's what I was trying to say actually at the last meeting, is that, and then you explained to me, because we did have a conversation earlier, just for me to understand everything, that the board at any time, so whenever we are reviewing the capital projects next year, then any board member can point out something and say, we want to follow this more closely than HVAC.
Exactly.
Okay, and so then at that point, we can then say we would like to approve the contract?
You certainly can.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
And this is follow-up to yours, Ms. Hutchinson. So it's like once we voted on the barn, even though it was an unusual project, I mean, it was helpful to me to think, if we're looking at procurement, to take an example, and I guess that's fair. You were trying to do, just give us an example. But I am learning from your answer to Ms. Hutchinson. Once we had voted for that money for the barn, and then you had it bid and it went through this, and we take the low bid or whatever the policy says, it really doesn't come back to the board. But if we want it to, was that your answer to, or Lynn's answer?
Correct.
We can request that so that we keep up with the cost and we know how, you know how much, bottom line, and the barn is an unusual thing. I think it's a good thing to use for an example because, and I certainly support it, but it's like, as a board member, I know I want to be able to explain that we do follow our procurement policy, that we're knowledgeable of it, and that I can answer questions about whether or not things come back to us. So I appreciate that answer.
I was just going to say, what I just understood, though, from this presentation is we have the ability to basically delegate responsibility for making these decisions to one of these committees, and that's consistent with the procurement code.
Correct.
But we can pull it back to us if we want to.
Correct.
So, I mean, it's not that we're not violating the procurement code if we let a committee decide, or we let the administrators decide below certain levels, but we decide what's important that we want to see. And obviously, the very big projects, as prudence, we ought to be at least saying, okay, yes, we agree with their conclusions.
I know I've got the procurement code, and I think it's like 70 pages or something like that. And I really think that the board needs a copy of the procurement so that they can always go back and use it as a guide to see how things really work and to be able to follow it. Even though you might not understand exactly everything that's being said in it, but if you are looking at one certain thing, you might have a little bit of an idea and maybe be able to pick it up or be able to go and say under section so-and-so, what is this? Because I think I'm probably the only person on here that has a copy of it. And I have gone back many times and looked at it just to see, and so I wouldn't have to come and ask these questions because, most of the time it has been answered in the procurement. And so I would love for, because, I mean, we got people that know it's going to be on here for 2 years, and probably people that's going to be on here for 4 more years. So, and I think that we all ought to have a copy of this so that they can use it as a guide to follow what our procurement, what we are expected to do.
Ms. Baumgartner.
I just have one question. We looked at services over $25,000. Is that for like each individual service? Let's say we got a construction project, and we have an architect, we have a construction company, and we have land survey, all three, or, you know. Would it be like if maybe the whole project was, where each individual was over 25,000, or combined?
It's just for the it's the individual professional service.
Right, but it would be like for each service, rather
Yes.
than like if one particular project had 2 or 3 services.
It's for each service.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for your nice presentation. And
You're
enjoy-
welcome. And thank you again. Oops.
And Mr. Whitehead.
Question for the chairman. Are we considering revising our policy, or is this just educational for us?
I think this was educational for us, but if you remember, Ms. Hutchison brought up some really good points at our last meeting, so this is part of that process. And then I think we probably need to look at our policies and see if we need to tweak the policies. But I think you showed us the way tonight that if we have a specific project that's out of the ordinary that we want to track on the front end and then follow it up on the back end when the bids come in to give that final approval, there's a way to do that. So that's part of what we're doing tonight.
And I think that and I know you got your hand up, but I was going to say, you know, your suggestion about the procurement code, if we ever have a big project, that ought to be distributed to all the board members, and they offered a mini training session or something, but it just, I don't think you need it for every capital budget year. And-
You know, how small things work too.
But I know, but you're going to put people to sleep if they have to go read a 70-page code.
Well, you don't have to read the whole
But
thing.
you can have it as an option, but I think as a reminder that they have the ability to go sit down with somebody and get briefed on it. Or if we do a very big project, then we ought to make it as prominent as displaying it to them, at least where they can go on the website to review it.
I know, Lynn, and I think you're going to agree with me on this one. You cannot change the procurement code without going through an extreme amount of hardship, because this is basically following the South Carolina procurement code. So, I mean, so when you're talking about changing policies and codes, in this little green book I have right here, it is not that simple. And so, and I think everybody would probably urge you to follow the state procurement code or the codes that are in this book, because if you start changing them, I think it really becomes a headache. Am I correct?
I wouldn't say
You
change
are-
the procurement code. I was saying our policy.
This is policy. This is part.
Part of our policy.
So you can't change anything because this has been approved by the state.
But no, what I'm saying, we can have policies beyond that.
But like what, I mean, like any construction policies?
We can put policies in place.
We don't even know this.
I mean,
Well-
if we want to have a matter of policy, if we go into a $50 million building project, that the superintendent or the chair would distribute the procurement policy to all the board members and offer them a session with Mr. Richardson to get briefed on it. That's a policy. We don't have to have a state statute to draft a policy. We can't conflict with that perhaps.
no.
But we can have, I mean, I was trying to offer something helpful to address your concern.
Yeah, I understand
But
that.
I'm not saying go in and modify a
Because I think-
statutory provision.
Because a lot of people think that you can do this, you know, that you can change these procurement codes, which,
That wasn't my.
okay, well, I'm sorry. That's not, that's what
I'm going to recognize Ms. Hutchison.
Mr. Gant, you just, and I appreciate what you brought back, the point that I was making at the last meeting. So since we had pulled the barn, and since there's nothing in the procurement code that says whether or not the board should approve the contract, since it's something that we did ask to be pulled, I think, maybe it's too late. I don't know if this has already been awarded or not, but I think this is a great example of where the board would want to approve the contract once the bids came in. So have we already awarded this, Mr. Richardson? It's already built?
The hand's been held.
Yeah, tear it down. I want to vote on that contract. That was Mr. Haltwanger's suggestion, by the way. Okay, thank you very much.
So we followed it. We didn't, in other words, with the barn, since it's done, it was done, we followed our policy, didn't we?
We did, and bringing it back to what brought this discussion on, in the future, there may be special projects that we want to follow, and once the bid is out there, we want to bring it back to the board, and the board give final say to it before it's actually awarded. I think Ms. Hutchinson would agree with me on that, right? I just kind of reiterated what we're talking about. With special projects in the future, we may want to bring it back to the board for final approval, and we can do that as long as we set it up ahead of time. So that's part of what we're doing tonight, and then any policies we want to put in place, we understand we can't change state procurement code. We're not trying to do that, but we may have policies that'll help us better follow the code and this policy in the future.
Mr. Camp, can
I notice an awful lot of this falls on the superintendent or his designee, and I have great comfort in that, Dr. Hefner. So I know you have a lot of great designees that you work with. Yes.
In wrapping this up too, it was very important to me, and I appreciate your time and effort to explain this to us, because I do think that every single tax dollar is important, because, we need facilities and we need money for everything we do to give quality education. So I think, I appreciate the fact that Ms. Lovelace was just taking that barn as an example, but really the horses are out of the barn already, so I don't guess it matters. But we learned. I mean, I really do appreciate learning, because I know I needed to have the difference, about the committees, and are we following our procurement policy? Because I thought that's what was said at the last meeting when we brought it up, that we weren't following some of it, and I didn't want to think we weren't doing that. So now you've got me clear, and I think it was very, informative, and I know I needed it, and I thank you.
Oh, you're certainly welcome.
Mr. White.
This will be my last suggestion, but just to sort of encompass everything we've said, Ms. Hutchinson and Ms. Lovelace, just why don't you just bring the barn back and we go through, and Mr. Richardson, when he's prepared, can explain how the bid changed, and we can talk about how we could have done that differently if we choose. But I don't want, and I'll go back to what we talked about one night, I don't want to automatically have to go through every single thing in our capital projects budget, but if a board decides, hey, we want to follow this project, we want to spend more time, or we want to approve this, I mean, we have the discretion to do that, but maybe you make the barn the case study for another meeting, but at least, and nothing negative against you, Ms. Levis, but it's hard for us to follow too if we're not up to speed, or if we don't get a briefing, and that's really what the board would need, with Mr. Richardson to give a briefing. Okay, here are the facts, now let's talk about this in a little more detail.
I was just thinking that this would be a perfect time for me to give an example. So, and I really didn't have a whole lot of time that I put it together. So, but when we started talking about it, I said, this is a good thing to look at, because I actually saw these numbers, and I saw that I thought that this would be a good one, because I didn't understand some of how we did some things. And I wanted some explanations of how we did them. But now, since we know, that we're going to do this, then we can listen, and like you say, we'll take it as a case study. I agree totally.
Ms. Hutchinson.
I'd like directions to that barn. Mr. Haltwanger and I don't know where that barn is.
Where's the barn? It's next to the cake center. It's out front.
Already up?
Well, but it's going to be, to build it, they'll come.
I did. I
was about to say.
He's 7. He's not going to be starting
You're wrong, yeah.
Are you completing your report?
I am, actually, I am finished. If you don't have anything else,
We're going to give you a hand.
Yes, we are. Thank you. Thank you for going through that. That was a request of the board, and we've all learned something from it. We appreciate you
That was a crash.
sharing with us.
That was
It
a crash.
very,
Okay.
very good.
I might need it to.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
And you sincerely mean that, don't you? Okay. Thank you very much.
You need us to go back up there?
Let's
Stay
see
here?
what-
Or we can go out from here without going back?
I think we need to stay.
All right.
Is the item 16, initial report on Vision 2020. And Dr. Hefner, I have to tell you, doesn't seem that many years ago when you did Vision 2015. So time does mark away, and I'm very anxious to see your Vision 2020 tonight, so thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to share it, and thank you, Ms. Robinson. I appreciate your walking us through the procurement policy, and I'm hopeful that we will have need to become better acquainted with this and to put many of these actions into place in the near future. Tonight, I just wanted to share with you an initial report on Vision 2020. I'm often asked, as you know, to describe the district, and I say that I can describe it in one word, which is extraordinary. And the definition of extraordinary is beyond what is usual, ordinary, regular, or established. I believe that the district's sustained high level of success is a reflection of at least three things: a laser focus on teaching and learning; secondly, excellent teachers and outstanding students; and third, phenomenal parental and community support. Now, there's a second word that I could use to describe the district as well, which is this: dynamic. And according to the Oxford Dictionary, dynamic means a system characterized by constant change. Now, I'm going to give you a fact and then an opinion. While our district's formula for sustained success has remained constant for many years, other variables in our district are ever-changing. And so here's my opinion. The district's skill in dealing with its ever-changing variables is a major reason for the district's sustained high-level success. Now let's talk about some recent variables of note. And again, it's been my privilege to be here since January of 2011. And since that time, we've had significant issues and have dealt with things pertaining to safety and security, technology, early childhood education, improvements to and reinvestments in our existing facilities, the building of and need for additional facilities, and increase in enrollment. And the increase in enrollment, of which we spoke a little bit earlier, of the 301 additional bodies we have this year over the same time last year, and the 500, almost 600 students over the past 3 years, has impact on our need for building of new facilities, as well as improvements and reinvestments in our existing facilities. So tonight, I'm going to give you sort of an initial look at a proposed facilities plan, which I will call Vision 2020. And the facilities plan is about multiple things. It's about identifying improvements and reinvestments needed within our existing physical plant. It proposes construction of additional schools and facilities as needed, promotes the viability and marketability of every school within the system, and ensures an infrastructure that enables the district to plan for its ever-changing needs and to effectively execute the plans that we make. So before I present Vision 2020, I want us to take a minute and look back at 2015, which Mr. Gant just referenced. It was exactly 5 years ago tonight, September 12, 2011, that I brought to you a plan for Vision 2015 at Dutch Fork Middle School. At that time, our student enrollment was flat. We had approximately 2,300 students in portable classrooms, which was down from a peak of about 3,000 because at that time we were already involved in several of the projects related to the bond referendum of 2008. And there was an effort on the part of some community members to block the improvements to an expansion of Chapin High School and efforts to recall the 2008 bond referendum vote. So at that point, I proposed a 5-step plan for moving us ahead. And I do want to review those steps because I think they're essential. I think understanding your past and how you got to where you are is important in terms of moving ahead. So number 1, I proposed that we renovate and expand Chapin High School on its present site. And I've given that a dotted line check mark. It's essentially done, but we still have, as we know, some things, loose ends to tie up there. We still have some things that are still unresolved, but it's certainly a work in progress and nearing completion. Secondly, I propose that we build a new high school on the Spring Hill site and open it as a magnet high school. Give that a check mark. Thirdly, I proposed that we make significant improvements to the physical facilities at Irmo High and Dutch Fork High. And I give that a check mark. And I do want to talk a little bit about that because that was a little bit of a change from what had been in the 2008 referendum. Actually, the change was that we devoted more funds and more attention to Irmo High and Dutch Fork High than we had originally thought. The reason for that is somewhat conveyed here. When we talk about making a world-class facility at Chapin High and a world-class facility at Spring Hill, and all of it feeding to the Center for Advanced Technical Studies, it was important that all 4 of our traditional high schools, all 4 of our schools, be world-class facilities and be in a position to compete. And I felt that it was essential that we reinvest in those other two high schools to make this a viable school district in terms of promoting all of our high schools. And so I asked for your support on that. You gave it, and I am very proud of the fact that we have done what we have done on our other campuses. Number 4, I want to talk about it a little bit too. Initially, I had said build a new elementary school. After we looked at what revenue we had and where our students were and what the needs were, I gave you a revised step a little bit after the initial presentation to build the new middle school. And that has been done in terms of Chapin Middle. And I want to share with you all of these are slides that come right out of the Vision 15 presentations, but I want to revisit why that recommendation was to go with the middle school at that time rather than the elementary school. It was because we believed that building the new middle school would provide the best educational opportunities for our students and effect the greatest return in our investment of limited resources. We were worried about how much money we had left in the referendum, and when we looked at the availability of converting the old Chapin Middle to an intermediate school and the relief it would give us with some of our enrollment issues, my feeling was and remains that the best thing to do at that point was to build the middle school next, and we did. Now, number 5 was to expand magnet and choice options throughout the district to make optimum use of existing space enhance the ability of each school to compete effectively with other schools in our district and community, and to meet the unique educational needs of our students. And I give that a big check. A lot of that was thanks to a $10 million plus grant that we got from the Magnet Schools of America to help us launch our Magnet School initiative. But we have seen great success in terms of getting people to be attracted to schools that live outside, schools that are located outside the areas where they live, and have responded very positively to it. And you recall the quote, "Each school must be uncommonly good at those things offered by most schools, and each school must be great at something not commonly offered in other schools." Here, we're looking right up at the sign, Dutch Fork Elementary, Academy of Environmental Sciences, and you heard Mr. Scott and Ms. Umberger talk tonight about all the exciting activities that are happening here at Dutch Fork and the excitement they draw from having kids come from all over to be a part of the experiences we provide here at Dutch Fork Elementary. Now, 5 years later, there's one big change in our brutal realities. We talked about them 5 years ago tonight, and there's been one big change. Many remain the same, but one change is our student enrollment is no longer flat. Our increase in student enrollment is on a steep trajectory of growth. Look at this curve. You'll see that we were on a steep trajectory from about 1990 up until the mid 2006, 2007. Then it flattened out. But when you look at the way the curve is going now, you see that the trajectory has returned, and giving the figures that I gave to you earlier. Please note that, again, from day 10 of last year to day 10 of this year, we've had a net growth of 301 students. And for the past 3 years, comparing our day 10 numbers, we're up 581 students. We worked hard to get out of portables, and unless we do something and move in the near future, we're going to be right back in the course of adding more portables to our physical plant. Of note, by cluster, there are many examples I could use, but I will share these. In the Chapin cluster, Lake Murray Elementary, as of the 10th day, had 995 students, which is almost identical to the enrollment they had year before last, prior to us taking 5th grade out. So we took 5th grade out, and within a year, they're now as big as they ever were in just K through 4th grade. Secondly, Chapin Middle School, which we had built ideally for about 800 students, is now at 863 students. In the Dutch Fork cluster, and I would point out at Chapin Middle, we serve only 2 grades, 7 and 8. At Dutch Fork Middle, the same thing is true. In 2 grades there, 7th and 8th, we continue to have over 1,000 students. That campus is packed. Dutch Fork High School remains filled with over 1,700 students. And in the Irmo cluster, a couple of points of note. Harbison West, which just a few years ago was our smallest elementary school, is now our 3rd largest of the 12 elementary schools with 650 students. One of the successes there has been the Escalaris program, and I am told that we have students coming from all other 11 elementary schools in the district to Harbison West. That's one of the reasons why their numbers are up, and that program has been very successful. And at Seven Oaks Elementary, which also at one time had the distinction of being our smallest elementary, it is now our 4th largest elementary school with 632 kids. Now, what's happening at Seven Oaks is that all 13 apartment complexes there are full, and there are kids coming to us from those apartment complexes. And according to Ms. Wilson, the principal there, we are beginning to see kids come to us from Woodland Hills and Gardendale, where homes are turning over, where there have been people who've lived there for 40, 50 years, are making decisions to move, and the homes are being sold to families with children. So we have pressure points throughout the entire system, not just in one point. So to address our needs related to growth and enrollment and ensuring the continued viability of the existing components of our physical plant, tonight I'm going to make 5 more recommendations since we've been successful in meeting the first 5 from Vision 2015. One is that we add a 3rd wing to Chapin Middle School. Now, I want to point out that the 3rd wing would only be there to continue to serve students in 7th and 8th grade. It would not be there to expand the number of grades, but for us to continue to meet our growth in grade 7 and grade 8. Secondly, I'm recommending that we build a new elementary school, which I'll call elementary number 13, in the Chapin cluster. We'll have more specifics on that a little bit later, but I think number 1 and number 2 need to be planned for and done very quickly as we can effect it. Number 3, to ensure that the district can adequately plan for growth and that the district can effectively execute those plans, I'm recommending that we restore the Assistant Superintendent for Administration position, which has been empty for the last 20 years, and that we replace it, or we retitle it Chief Planning and Administrative Officer. I think it is only prudent as we're entering another period of growth and as we see the challenges that come with building and renovating, we need oversight in terms of looking at what we're doing and managing our projects, and I recommend that occur. Number 4, continue to expand magnet and choice options throughout the district for the very same reasons we had before, making optimum use of existing space, enhancing the ability of every school to compete effectively, and thirdly, to meet the unique educational needs of our students. We have applied for another grant to help us. We don't know what our chances are. My understanding is they're only going to give 10 nationwide this year, and so we'll keep our fingers crossed. But if we miss this time, there will be another round coming up next year, and we will certainly go for that as well. And number 5, assess and prioritize the need for and identify a plan to fund these projects. It's a long list, and it's probably not inclusive of everything, but these are things that need attention, and we need to begin thinking now, what's the priority, assessing them, and how can we possibly fund them. Upgrades to Nursery Road Elementary, a school without walls, Harbison West Elementary, a school without walls, Dutch Fork Elementary, a great-looking school with a wonderful history, but you see the water on the carpet tonight. Look all around you here. It's been around for a long time, and it's showing wear and tear and needs work, and as does H.E. Corley. We know that we've long had the request for an auditorium or a fine arts center for Chapin High or in the Chapin community. Upgrades to our technology infrastructure. Upgrades, additions to Dutch Fork Middle School and Dutch Fork High School, which are at capacity and beyond capacity. Improve facilities for maintenance and transportation. You've seen our facilities, they're just woefully inadequate, and we need to do something to modernize those facilities. Upgrades and additions to the district office. Upgrades to safety and the safety security infrastructure of our district. One of our neighboring districts, with which I have a little bit of familiarity, has a staff of 84 FTEs in their safety and security unit. Ours is 1.0 FTE. We do with one person what some of our neighbors do with far more, and it's something we need to take a look at. Upgrades at Crossroads Intermediate, Irmo Middle, and Irmo High. While great work has been done at Irmo High, much work remains to be done, particularly in the older parts of the building, needs to continue to be upgraded. And construction of elementary school number 14, which would also be in the Chapin cluster. I think given where the growth is going, where the building permits are, where the sewer taps are, we know that's where it's headed, and we need facilities there. And again, there's no question our other facilities are either full or they're going to refill as that same process that's worked at Harbison West and Seven Oaks, and there's been a refilling there of those neighborhoods. I think that circle's going to move in, and it's going to pick up Nursery Road and Leaphart and continue to work its way across the district. Now, I recognize that I've given you a lot of stuff to think about tonight, and so what I want you to know the next step is, I don't think decisions of this magnitude need to be made lightly or under duress. So the next step is that at our next meeting, I will bring to you a proposal and a funding plan for moving ahead with an additional wing at Chapin Middle to address the existing and future needs of the 7th and 8th grade facility. As before, we took it one rock at a time, you may recall. We'll take this one rock at a time, and I think the most doable piece is this one, and it's one that I will bring you a plan about to include funding and the process for making that work at our next meeting. Now, I think back to our two words. We're an extraordinary district and a dynamic district, but we have to continue to act. We have to have vision and move forward, or else we will become an ordinary district and a dying district. We don't want that to occur. We want to remain extraordinary and dynamic. That's my initial presentation on Vision 2020, and I look forward, and with your permission, I'll bring you back a specific plan on step number 1 next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hefner. Wow, it's been a full night, hasn't it? A good plan. We'll look forward to your step 1 on the 26th. That brings us to item number 17, our adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Baumgartner.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
And Ms. Hammond, you second? Any discussion?
No.
If not, everyone has a lot to ponder, and we'll see you all on the 26th. All
Too
in
much on
favor,
my-
raise your hand.
Too much.